Joe Biden.
Wow.
Joe Biden mentioned, and it was so quick. I don't know if anybody else heard it, but it was during the debate where he was talking about. I don't know what Trump said. Anyway, he was talking about how he actually went into inner city Wilmington to find out why there were different penalties for cocaine. So they were actually talking about the criminal justice system. And we were just talking in the book, it was mentioning, 5 years for powder versus crack 10 years. So I thought that was kind of profound. It was like kind of quick right at the end of what he was saying.
Yeah, this is Kagiso. They on WNYC or NPR, they had this author who wrote a book about Biden, and so he, introduced the crime bill, and so he was saying that it had a lot of, and there were, Black politicians and Black people who were for the crime bill, but they thought there would be some parts of it which would help people not commit the crimes, but the Republicans had taken all those parts out, and it was just punitive, So
yeah, that was when they changed the Speaker of the House. Who I don't remember his name, but yeah, I heard that also.
Right. Yeah.
They took out the social justice part and the part about having drug court, and as well as having people go to rehab instead of to jail.
Right. But that was taken out of the bill, so it was just, people were in jail, for a long time.
Why would Joe Biden go to Delaware? Like, why would he just choose one specific place?
He's from Delaware. Well, he lives in Delaware, but Wilmington is actually close to him. I think he lives fairly close to Wilmington or in Wilmington. So I guess it was brought to him about, the drug problem, looking at the injustice with the difference in the sentencing for crack as opposed to powder.
But I don't think he needed to go to Delaware.
That's what
to
I'm
realize
saying.
That there was injustice in sentencing.
No. He wanted to hear more about what was going on.
Yeah.
So he had gone over and talked to them. He knows somebody and has friends or whatever over there, and he wanted to hear it from the people that live there, how it affected their neighborhoods.
And I think he worked there actually as a lifeguard or something at a city pool when he was younger.
But he's a politician too, so he did it, I'm sure, for political reasons, So.
Yeah. That sounds
Because you could come to the Bronx. Come to any place. Yeah. Washington, D.C.
Or read this book.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead, Tiff.
No, I was going to change the subject. So if you're going to stay on, so if we're talking about Joe Biden, during the debate and on 60 Minutes, and just, routinely, Trump has been consistently throwing out that he's done more for Black people and criminal justice reform or whatever. So I was like, you know what, I'm getting to the very bottom of this. I need to find out exactly what Trump has done, because I know he had passed a law. And it was very contradictory, which is what Joe Biden is presenting. Biden's like, oh, it's time to reform criminal justice, but then I still want to give more money to the cops. So where are you actually fixing things here? And then Trump is the same way. He's very contradictory. He tried to commute the sentences of low marijuana offenders, nonviolent, but then he also wants to, do law and order and whatever other crazy nonsense. So they're both very flip-floppy on the issue, and I really don't believe anybody wants to reform it.
I just want to know in the chat box, thank you, Sarata, for sharing Black women's invisible struggle against police. The link. Gregory was like, that's where he ran into corn pop. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh
Everyone
my
knows
God.
that.
No, I did. I started laughing when I saw it. Mhm.
Oh my God.
I don't want to get off
Yeah.
track. But...
No. But it's, I guess that brings up a question like, who is this for? Like, why is he doing this for? And this has been coming up as I'm reading this book, as I'm reading like how Alexander is narrating us like, the different aspects of this monster that we're learning more intimately. So that's been coming up for me. Like, who is this for? Like, who is she writing for? A lot of it is, I get through it because it's not necessarily like we're reading like a Morrison or something. It's so starkly different. It makes me miss it even more. But like, this is really necessary. So, well, have y'all been reading it or feeling like, am I the audience that this book is supposed to be for? Like how it's written? For me, it's the percentages, like the using of the percentage a lot. Like, it makes me think like, okay, like who is this really gonna move? Like, did we need to know the amount, the numbers necessarily to care about the issue? I don't know. Is that what this is about? Not sure. I'm just posing a question to the group. If that has come up for y'all.
Because I'm having trouble keeping up with this book because, as you said, it feels very academic, right?
See.
As opposed to like just like a regular read. So I'm literally up to just the preface today.
Right.
And she was saying that her intended audience is people like herself that at some point didn't believe there was any necessary need for prison change, but then eventually realized that there was prison reform, and that she wanted to give up basically like the artillery to make their case. And so I think that's the reason why, like actual data, why she's giving all these percentages, because people have a tendency to be very dismissive when you talk about these type of subjects.
Right.
She's like, I want to give you the ammunition to stand like firm in what you believe in, if you believe in prison. So I think that's the reason why like this.
Got it. Yeah.
Also, don't most people claim that they want evidence, even if they don't mean it, right? Think of the number of people that you argue with, debate with, people who will say, whether in good faith or bad faith, well, what's your evidence? What's your evidence? And then you could give them evidence such as what she provides in the book. And they'd still wind up sticking with whatever biased belief system they had beforehand. I'm thinking, so just off the top here, you were talking about the crack versus cocaine. Early in the chapter, she's talking about the prevalence of drug use in the white community, even like white students, white teenagers. White students use cocaine at 7 times the rate of black students, crack cocaine at 8 times the rate, heroin at 7 times the rate of black students. I just know there's a number of people that you would say that to them and they'd be like, that can't be true, because their deeply embedded racial biases are such that they would never believe that to be true. They would find some way to say, well, that she must be lying, even though she's citing, was it National Institute on Drug Abuse? Because, think of all the media depictions and cultural depictions that we have of drug abusers, crack abusers. I even just started putting them down because they are overwhelmingly black. Think about The Wire. Think about Samuel L. Jackson and Halle Berry in Jungle Fever. Think about Chris Rock in New Jack City. Think about, just keep reeling off examples. You would think that the majority is black people who are using these drugs, when factually that's not the case. But too many people already believe the opposite, that it's going to be hard to kind of undo that, or at least through a book like this.
No, I agree. I think so too. I think that was the point, just because even in just talking with my own family and just teachers and just different people, like they really believe that, I think black people are in a position that we're in because it's our fault. Like they really believe like, no, we do use drugs. Our communities were really bad at the time. We really did need those laws. It wasn't just white people who wanted this. It was black people too. Like, and I mean, I think it is important to have these, I guess that's what she's writing it for that, because we believe it sometimes too. Like I remember like Wayne Gretzky, they said he was found with crack cocaine, and I was so happy. I just remember being like so happy because it was like, white people use crack too. Like I was just, and I used to tell everybody that, like,
right,
let's see,
period,
you know what I mean? And it, but
period.
you know, yeah, right. But it was so, but I mean, that's why I think so. I think that's what she's writing it for the vast majority of people who really, they really don't know.
Yeah.
And people who watch the evening news. Like, I was just thinking about this recently. Like, that's a criminal case waiting to be filed. Like the evening news, like at 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock. Like, I figured out years ago how problematic it was. It was like they would talk about the weather and then jump into some shooting in Brooklyn or some drug deal going wrong or whatever. I'm like, well, what does that have to do with anything? Like, you're not even providing any news. Like, night after night, you're just providing negativity about Black people. And it's like this whole concerted effort. And I remember there was a sister who was like the news director at ABC. And I was like, I wonder how she deals with that, like putting out these negative images about Black people. And like ultimately, like they forced her out. But I was like, because you're contributing to the problem, you know? And this is what people who believe that Black people and brown people are all criminals and drug dealers and addicts, they consume only this kinds of news, and that's why they have this mindset.
Yeah. There's also a hipness when white people are presented as drug users, and particularly drug sellers. They're always like the cool kids, you know, who kind of like. I was watching
Edgy.
the show Euphoria, and if you look at how they portray the white drug seller as opposed to his supplier who is Black or is Latin, the Black dude looks like the worst thing. And it's so funny. He lives in the Bronx, and I've seen him. He has face tattoos. I mean, in the show, he has like face tattoos. He is viscerally mean and angry in the show. But the white guy who sells the drugs, he's like just like a slacker dude. You know, he has a regular business. He just sells drugs on the side. And I don't think people like kind of make those connections, how influential they are, you know, in society. So it's crazy that way.
And I think this has been from the beginning, 400 years ago, where Black people were maligned, you know. You take Birth of a Nation, you take, any kind of pictures of Black people, and it didn't look like us. It just looked like somebody, some creep or whatever. And this has been going on for 400 years. It's just that right now, we're in 2020, and she wrote the book in 2010. And so Black people have been, and brown people have been shown as, and it doesn't matter whether it's government or media or school or whatever, as the bad guy and the ugly guy and the guy that's going to rape your mother and the guy that's going to mug your grandmother, and this has been going on, and even as Black people, we have been brainwashed too. So we have to look into ourselves, to see what we think about ourselves, and what we think about our brothers and sisters, so.
I think that like media representation is definitely. Do you think that Alexander is talking about media representation enough in her book, or do you think that that was something that she would leave up for discussion? Many of her cases and points are literal cases, right? So I think it's also, she's an attorney, so she's like trying to make a quote unquote art. She uses common sense a lot. And so I guess what kept coming up for me is like the people that we're trying to convince otherwise don't have common sense. Like this system is not about common sense. Like this, to make that assumption that that's what, it just feels like, is this approach has this approach worked? I don't think it has up to this point, to kind of, and it kind of shows to how, like the left or sort of like liberal leaning sort of arguments of like, let me show you how this makes sense. Whereas the right or the opposition, they're not working with sense, you know, they're not even trying to reason at all. There's nothing that makes sense. They go for the jugular. They go for like the emotion of it all to fuck with everything. You know what I mean? Like, so I guess this is what I'm thinking about that as an approach. If you were to use the percentages to like convince like your racist neighbor or whatever that, hey, 60% of people, like, is that the best approach? I don't know. I don't know if it's working. But
It's funny.
another thing,
Oh, go
I wanted to say too, another thing that I about at the beginning when she's naming like the, you know, a lot of white people use crack too. This is very similar to how the welfare queen also example is parallel to this at the same time that she does not address. And it's a missed opportunity to talk about the gender piece in all of this that continuously keeps failing for me every time I read this. But part of it, I think the welfare queen, if y'all can talk about that a little bit too, I mean, is the parallel to this, but specifically Black women. But yeah, Marta, what she was gonna say?
I was just gonna piggyback on what you said about trying to make common sense to people that have no common sense, because there was a part in when I was reading where she was like dropping all these numbers, and I was just like, but honestly, I'm tired. Like, I'm tired of having to make it make sense, because if you just have humanity, then I don't have to drop numbers. It's so simple. If this was a bunch of white people that were being murdered at high proportionate numbers, this would be a national crisis. Just like all of a sudden the opioid addiction is like, oh my God, we must help them. No, when it was the crack situation, nobody cared. It was like, oh no, now it's a war. It's just like, I don't need to make it make sense for you with numbers, with empathy. Like, it's just simple common knowledge, and that shit gets tiring. After a while, you're like, am I living in a parallel world where it's like people just don't get it?
Yes, yes, you are.
Yeah,
I think she, no, serious, but seriously, I think she touched on that in the book, because she was like, when you have segregated societies, you have groups of people that live over here and then groups of people that live over here. Now, if you want to be biased, because it's a conscious decision at this point, if you want to be biased and you live in a segregated community, you don't know any Black people, you don't work with any Black people, you don't make a concerted effort to even come around Black and brown people, it's easy to just believe this. And so the common sense is not even common sense. It's just like you're making a decision to be biased. And so you can't help those people because the information is out there. And a rational thinking person will be like, gee, this just doesn't sound right. You know, this doesn't sound right, but these are not people who want to believe the truth.
But it's even people in our administration. I'm sorry, Ron, that even today, I don't know who it is. He was on TV and he was talking real crazy out his mouth, talking about that A, Black people were complaining, and B,
oh, Jared, that was Jared.
Jared Kushner.
And then they backed him up. The White House backed him up. So it's like you have the highest authority confirming these stereotypes. So like, how do you get around that shit? That shit,
You can't because you know what you're dealing with. See, I like when people let me know who I'm dealing with. And with the Trump administration, I know what I'm dealing with. That's why I'm not outraged to hear Jared Kushner say that on television. I know what kind of person he is, what kind of background he has. I know who Trump is. I know who Ivanka is. These are people with willful ignorance, and they want to push this narrative forward. So it is exhausting if you try to make sense to them, but if you understand that they want to continue the bias, then you don't get so stressed out when they say obnoxious things.
But to a certain extent, you have to remain outraged because this is costing Black life. And if you just ignore it, this is such a serious problem with how they are disenfranchising Black people. I mean, a lot of this is changing, but you know, for a long time, you went to prison, you couldn't get in public housing, you couldn't get food stamps, you couldn't get a driver's license, you couldn't vote. So like, we can't. I definitely understand how you feel when you're in conversations and people don't want to agree with facts. But I think we still have to find a way to always push back against that, because Black people are just being railroaded into prison. And again, things are starting to change, but usually once that happens, your life can never be the same as it was before you went to prison. And people are going to prison like not like 10, 11% higher, 10, 11 times higher. That's like for every one white person, 10 Black people are going to jail for the same crime. That's what's so crazy about it. It's not like, well, 10 Black people go to prison, then 11 white people go. We're talking about like an exponential number of people. And Michelle Alexander points this out in the book, like the increase in imprisonment of Black people from the 80s to now. It's like a whole nation has gone to prison. You know, that we're talking about those kind of numbers. It's just so striking and so overtly racist, because the same people who are sending law enforcement, government, correctional facilities, the same people who are like working together to send bodies to prison are the same people who track drug statistics and know that white people use drugs at higher rates than Black people. So I mean, I definitely get the exhaustion, but it's almost like you just can't give up.
Right. And I feel like I don't have a right, in the sense I don't even have a right to be exhausted because I'm not a Black
Right,
person in
right.
America. You get what I'm saying? So like I also have to acknowledge that privilege on my end, that even though I'm a Black woman living in America, you know, and that those things can happen to me, they don't happen to me at the same proportions that they happen for Black men, which she talked about that. I live with an officer. So we have these type of conversations all the time. And when you're talking about numbers now, some of the things, like when he's clapping back, he's always trying to clap back with numbers. And I was like, but honey, you cannot clap back with numbers that have been skewed from the beginning. You know, like there's just no way. They've been skewed so that it looks like Black people commit more crimes, but they don't. But they don't. Like that's just the reality of it.
They're convicted for those more crimes, but they don't commit more crimes.
Exactly.
No, they're not even convicted. They plead out to the crimes.
Right, which is even worse.
No choice, because they have no resources. And yeah, it's just, I could keep going on and on.
It's exhausting.
And what's not talked about also is what they call white collar crime, which hurts millions of people. You know,
in the beginning of the book.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
She talks about it in the beginning of the book. She says that white collar crimes are more likely to do more damage than.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's what I'm saying, that it does, but you don't hear about this, you know, in every day, you know, in the news or whatever. You don't hear about the bank manager or bank president who defrauded all these people, you know, which are you and me, you know. You know, you don't hear about a lot of this crime that is committed by, you know, white folks mostly, who are, you know, higher economic group people. You don't hear about that, you know, so that's another part of it.
Yeah, I worked at Showtime in the early days, and I had a front seat to so much white collar crime. It was unbelievable. And mostly by VPs. The man I worked for, he would have me do the subscriber numbers every month for Showtime. And every month my numbers were negative. And every time he saw my numbers, he made them positive. And those numbers would go to the treasurer and the president. And it took them a year. And I had left, and my friend called me and said, Jackie, they just took Howie out in handcuffs.
Yeah.
And that was my boss, and he had 4 schemes going on in-house to take money. I saw so much white collar crime. It was it exists, and it's thriving in these companies.
The Purdue Pharma family, it was recently in the news that they pled out. They have to pay a fine of like $25 billion, just something that's like chump change to them. Right. But they're so rich. I think once you become so rich, you get the best lawyers who can only focus on your case and then negotiate your way out of any criminal charges, and you just pay a fine. And it's like, how much damage did Oxycontin do to America? The CIA, for the Black people's part, the CIA loosely gave some bogus apology for dumping drugs in the Black communities. They tried to be like, oh, well, yeah, we admit that we did it, but we didn't know it was going to turn out the way that it did. I'm like, that's it? That's what we get? And that's it.
Don't believe it. I mean, I'm paranoid, but I think it's done on purpose, really. So it's not that people don't know. And talking about, her book, I read it, and I'm just, ordinary woman, and I'm, moderately intelligent and all like that. But there were things in the book that, I didn't know. I mean, or even the percentages, I mean, that hit me, and really made me think about our people in jail, and so, I mean, like, I'm not going to try to convince somebody who I know has a closed mind. Let them go ahead. I'm not going to do that, but somebody who is asking questions and really wants to know, but maybe biased one way or the other, but it's not strong, then I'll engage them in conversation about this. But I mean, like Jared Kushner, he's that's his father-in-law. Give me a break. He's working for the government. I wouldn't expect a darn thing from him. And all that whole clan, they're evil son of a bitches. That's all I can say. No, really, they are evil.
What's so crazy about the Jared Kushner statement is he's kind of pushing back. He's kind of making a statement around like merit, that Black people should kind of pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and sure, we'll help you, but I think, to kind of paraphrase, he said that like Black people need to want to be successful.
Yes.
And here he is getting a job from his father-in-law. He's rich because of his father. Like, he's never worked to build wealth himself.
Right.
So it's his father and his father-in-law giving him a job. And here he is talking about, Black people having to want to, be successful.
And that goes back to my point. When you're segregated from groups of people of color and you don't know anyone in your inner circle, you don't put any effort towards trying to befriend people of color, then you just make these mass generalizations based on wherever you get your news from, and God knows what Trump says to him about Black people, because he has his own history of discrimination against Black people in housing. And I don't know what Jared's family may have the same history. I'm not even sure.
They do.
Yes.
They do.
Yeah. So it's just disgraceful. And Marta, it's exhausting. I mean,
watching the news.
There's something I didn't even realize. So we can't even say that he's willfully ignorant. He just wants to be a dick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's not only does the Jareds of the world want to be dicks, but there is huge money incentives to keep the system the way it is. Like, I think we can't ignore like the fact that this is a multi-billion-dollar business, and they're still making money off of Black and brown bodies. Like,
period.
Like there is so, like, our economy is tied to the criminal, like the way that the criminal justice system is set up right now, and the way law enforcement is set up right now. So we can't ignore that. Yes, we have these racist bigots, of course. But even, you know, at the levels of Jared, at the levels of all of these politicians and government officials, they're getting huge contracts. You know, they're making business deals with all these corporations in order to keep, you know, the prison industrial complex going. So it's not just like, yes, it's racist, but it's also extremely capitalist. And we know in capitalism, you know, really is about ensuring that there is massive wealth inequalities. And you have, I mean, under capitalism, there is always an exploited group or groups of people. In this case, it's Black and Indigenous people and Latinx people. So yeah, it's like, yes, they're bigoted dicks, but people are making money. People are making tons of profit off of this.
There was a grassroots group that was trying to dismantle the system in the small way that they could. And what they were doing was trying to out prosecutors and judges who have a financial stake in the private prison complex. I didn't follow up to find out how much effort, like how successful they were with the effort, but I thought that that was something worthy of being funded, because if you can try to chip away at it and show someone's bias, you know, perhaps you can keep getting judges and prosecutors removed. I mean, it's something small in the system, but I think that maybe that can snowball into a larger effort.
I think even, you know, to Sarita's point, like she was saying, even, like in the book, she says, what is painfully obvious when one steps back from individual cases and specific policies, it's that the system of mass incarceration operates with stunning efficiency to sweep people of color off the streets, lock them in cages, and then release them into an inferior second-class status. Nowhere is this more true than in the war on drugs. So like, it's not just, like, this is not just happening, like it's on purpose, it's purposeful. And that's just what we have to, you know, keep thinking about, you know?
That's one of the main reasons why we can't get rid of prisons here in the city of New York when they keep talking about closing Rikers Island, and for some weird reason opening up 5 new jails.
In the Bronx.
But it's really about the correction officers union, and it's really about food services, and it's really about the amount of clothing that you have to prep for, you know, for people who are serving time. They have to be, you know, furnished with clothing and things like that. It's all of these, like Sarata said, there's all these industries fighting behind the scenes. So, you know, there are all these people up front, but there are people just, you know, whispering in Bill de Blasio's ear, you know, because de Blasio was like all for this early on, and now all of a sudden we don't hear about it, you know, and he's like, well, we got to study it more. So, I don't know.
And the prisoners make, there's an industry right there in the prisons, because they make different things that are sold for hundreds of dollars. And what do they get if they get anything? 10 cents. Yeah. You know, so it's so corrupt. There's so much corruption, you know.
In California, prisoners were fighting the fires, but they cannot get jobs as firefighters once they get out because they are prisoners, or they will have a record, you know, once they get out, which is, you know, so ironic and so crazy.
Yeah, the nerve that they're helping to save this community, and then
they're saving lives, but they can't correct their own lives, you know.
Yeah, I see here in the chat people have shared resources. So a good primer on racial capitalism. There's a link. Thank you, Gregory. And then Sarata is just saying, you know, it's not just private prisons, also state prisons. Everybody is making money off prisons. prisoners make everything from Victoria's Secret panties to mattresses. If you want to expand on that, please, unmute yourself, anybody else. Yeah. I don't know, Jazzy, if you were trying to raise your hand, if you want to unmute yourself and say something. I saw that.
That I always have this conversation with a friend of mine about the amount of products that are created in prisons that we all buy, but we're mad at Amazon. And I often feel like if we are going to attack Amazon, we really need to look at capitalism. And I'm sorry, I'm going off topic, but we really need to examine our own, each one of us in this chat and in the city and in the world. We need to examine, our role with the clothes that we buy, the T-shirts we wear. I think American Apparel for a long time, they may have been shamed into stopping. Nike for a long time used, sweatshops in other other countries. So we really, I don't. There may be a resource where we can just like list everything we cannot wear or eat or buy, because of questionable manufacturing practices. But yeah, and Amazon's just capitalizing off all of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we need to look into Black and Brown, Indigenous owned businesses and see how we can support them, really. I will never buy another book from Amazon, and I try not to buy anything else. I mean, there's, sometimes it's hard to find another company to buy something that you need. But I know that at least books, like I got it from the bookseller that One Bronx supports.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I got one book from there, and then there are other books, other booksellers. So I mean, it takes effort and time, but maybe that's something that we have to do. Maybe we can't do it all, but we can do some of it.
Yeah, I think Amazon is largely distribution. They have perfected the art of getting you your stuff, and everything from books to most of our clothing is coming out of Asia. Even if I'm a Black-owned company, I'm ordering my product to be made in Asia and brought back here.
I would really love to know how much kente cloth is actually made in Africa.
Not most of it.
Most of it's not. Yeah.
Most people don't realize that real kente cloth usually is made out of silk, right? And it's very thick. You rarely see it. Yeah. They're not letting it out. I think 90, most of the cloth is coming out of Asia, Malaysia. Yeah. I'm just saying that to say that I would venture to guess that 90% of whatever it is we're ordering or wearing is coming from somewhere else. Yeah. And so and even if I'm a Black-owned business, my manufacturing is outside of this country more than likely.
Right, but I mean, I don't know how to get beyond that. But at least the brother or sister will be getting something. And yeah, Amazon, definitely. Amazon, big what's his name, Bezos or whoever. I mean, he's not getting more money and not treating his workers right. So I mean, we just can do what we can do.
Yes.
When I was in Ghana, I went to the big market. They have this huge market. It's fantastic. And so I wanted to get some, me and my sisters, we wanted to get some material. And so we went to, you know, a couple of the sellers, and a lot of the material was made in China. And I said, I will not buy, you know, this material that is made in China from Ghana.
Yeah, the
And
Europe.
we just, you know, had to see what we could get that was made from Ghana. I mean, like in Ghana, Nigeria, other places, they used to have these factories where they would, you know, dye the cloth, they would make the cloth, they would make the clothes, etc. But those are very few now. So
Yeah, I've been in Ghana, and you do have to know where to go to get the real stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, the European roots of African cloth.
Listen, it's worldwide, you know.
It is.
It's worldwide.
It is. Yeah.
I mean, cotton is cheaper in Asia. You know.
Well, I just wanted to, since our new Supreme Court justice has just been sworn in, I was thinking about that when I read the McCleskey versus Kemp part, where it's like these prosecutors were people were trying to use racial discrimination as part of their defense, and how the courts just kept defaulting to this case, and how it kept going to the Supreme Court and just getting shut down. And then basically the courts are saying, oh, well, yeah, racial discrimination is just par for the course. So get over it. Like, we're not going to attempt to even address it. And I'm like, now with the courts even more conservative, like, yeah, we're just doomed on that front. I don't really see a way around that.
The crazy thing is that most cases will not get to the Supreme Court. What Donald Trump has done is he's loaded all the local federal courts throughout the country, which is where most cases kind of are really decided. You know, few cases, you know, as a percentage, few cases get to the Supreme Court. But the reason why you never hear Republicans criticizing Donald Trump is he's also loading up all the local federal courts with conservative judges. Like, he's like some record number. So we're going to be, I mean, hopefully not, but, you know, this could be like really traumatic for, you know, as far as criminal justice is concerned, for a really long time.
Yeah, it's in the hundreds.
I think it's over 200 and something.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 4 years, which has never been done before.
I think that it also shows, like, you know, the Supreme Court and judges also as key players in all of this. I think she makes it really clear for us that they're very much part of the greater scheme of things. You know, they're very much like, you know, we can say defund the police, FTP, but, you know, the judges and the court systems and all those who play the role are just as, if not probably even worse. I don't know, like, it's all part of the same thing. And I think that there's a romanticism around Supreme Court justices. So, like, people love Sonia Sotomayor, for example, you know, and things like that. And just kind of like, you know, how does I don't want to say nothing bad about, you know, the Supreme Court justices, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg necessarily, you know what I mean? But it's like, all right, but y'all were very much complicit in, you know, putting people in cages as much as police officers are. I mean, you know what I mean? And I think that this is one thing that the text does do really well. I think is like really, and because she's an attorney, that is just showing like the fallacy of the court system, just so blatant, especially in this particular chapter.
Eileen made a good point on the chat. She brought up the case of the people that were all charged together, and then one pled out because she had her kids, and then the courts ultimately dismissed the cases against the other people. So now she's screwed And it's like, well,
Yes,
obviously,
yes.
you know, what could she do? And like, what could a normal working person do in that situation?
Mm-hmm. And
It's
they're
just
upholding those
impossible.
decisions and making precedent on those decisions. They're just such a key thing to keeping it, to maintaining it, you know? Mm-hmm.
That was just really sad when I read that. It's unfortunately not isolated.
Right.
Well, in 13,
Yeah.
they talk about, I had heard about it, many times before, but I forgot the brother's name, the young brother who was kept in Rikers, no charges, nothing,
Cody Browder.
and
Browder.
yeah, and so they wanted him to take the plea, but he refused to do that because he says, I'm not guilty, I'm innocent. And so he was in jail for 3 years, I think. And then they let him out, no charges. But it did such damage to him that he killed himself. I mean,
Big Browder, yeah.
so that's,
As a
another
child.
example,
And how many people, go through that same process, don't kill themselves, but their mental health has just
Right.
been like eroded,
Right.
to the point where they can't be productive parts of society anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, if you live in a segregated society and you don't care, then you're not going to come into contact with these people anyway. So, like, what do you care?
But Sister Tiffany, it's more than that. It's that the system is racist to the core. So it's not even just living in segregated communities. It's that every part of life says, Black people are all the negative things about Black people. That you go to school, it says it. You go to work, you go to the police, you go every part. So people are brainwashed, and this is what they believe, and so.
But I think we stand a greater chance of being understood, and I'm saying we about Black people, Black and brown people, like if we're around other people to show them, that we're not all one monolithic group. It's easy to make those assumptions when you don't interact with any Black people, period. Like if you know Black people, if you work with them, like working is really important because that shows you this person is responsible, they're holding down a job, obviously they're paying their bills, they have an apartment. Like you cannot attribute like welfare queen to that. You cannot attribute like, drug addict, ignorant, uneducated. You can't assign those characteristics to that individual. So if you're working with them, if they live in your neighborhood, like you cannot just form these blanket observations about people because it doesn't work. And I think we were talking about common sense before. This is where you apply the common sense. Like if you're around them, there's no way you can apply these blanket theories without there being some sort of a contradiction.
Well,
no,
I think
it works that way. Really,
yeah, and I don't. And integration to some degree has been a failed project. And it's not the cure-all, and those people are as dark and mean as they can be. Integrated, they walk neck and neck with you and still take you out, or still undermine whatever. They know exactly what your humanity is. The 19th century project was to prove our humanity. All right, that was 19th century, and we're still are we still in that project? And we've been in integration for what, 40, 60 years?
Yeah.
And if they don't do that,
we shouldn't have to
they
prove
still make
anything
you out to just
to anybody.
the separate person.
But well, we're the best and the brightest anyway. Like they know that. They don't think that we're beneath them. They know that. They know what it is. They know what we are. Yeah, they don't. They're not confused because they don't hang out with us. Like again, this is all.
I don't know about
we make
that.
everything. We make everything. Our creativity moves this whole world. Like so, they already know that. This is just.
They know it, but they won't admit it. They're gonna say, "Oh, that's an exception."
Yes, that's the ones that say, "I have Black friends. That's my Black friend. They're not like the rest."
Yes.
They're
right.
And if you got
You're a
one
good
black
one.
friend, you
That's
in
some
trouble.
exactly.
I agree with
Right.
I agree with all of these points. I'm saying for the person who was really trying to make the effort to understand.
You froze, Tiff.
Froze. Yeah. Tiffany, you froze.
You froze.
Well, we can continue. She'll
Black
she'll
people,
warm
I'm
up.
trying to give credit here. What do I do?
You're back.
You got to repeat all of that, Tiffany. You were frozen.
Am I back now?
You're back.
Yeah, you're back.
I don't know where I cut off. I'll just say that I'm trying to give some credit to some non-Black people who are at least trying to understand Black people, maybe. I mean, I agree with all the points.
Yeah, good. But they need to read. They need to talk. They need to put in the effort and the work. I'm not going to be up there and say, "Oh yeah, I'm a good Black woman."
Oh,
I'm not going to do that for anybody. Nope. You know, I know who I am, and it's up to them to see who they are and to read and to find out about not just Black people, but Asian, Native American, Latino, everybody, and to see our humanness. But there, a lot of people don't want to put that effort in.
They already tried that. Don't you recall the anti-racist reading list from June? What happened, right? White fragility, how to be an anti-racist. Those people went out and bought those books, and I'm pretty sure most of them did. It's completely missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
This is about power. You need about seizing power is what this is about. We talk about in this chapter, prosecutors, judges, is about taking away their power. Trying to appeal to individuals is just a pointless exercise because they're going to willfully misinterpret you anyway is what it boils down to it. And they're invested in white supremacy because it serves them. So they don't care to know whether it's more of their white counterparts who are using drugs more than Black people. It doesn't matter to them because they're invested in it being the other way around because it's serving them perfectly fine with the way their lives are set up now.
Is Black Lives Matter helping at all, do you think?
Helping what way?
As far as changing their impressions of us?
No, it's not there. It's not. That's not what they're supposed to be doing.
Again,
they're not supposed to be doing that. Like I said, it's up to white folks to get educated. And I'm using that term very broadly about this country, the politics, Black people, etc. You know, Black Lives Matter is up for freedom in all different ways. And there are white people who are, like you saw during the demonstrations, you saw white people who were participating. So that's great. That's great. But that's not Black Lives Matter goal,
But I'm talking about the very people that you said that were peacefully demonstrating. There were a lot of them and they were younger, the white people. A lot younger.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So hopefully they'll go to their neighbors and to their friends and their family and try to talk to them.
I think that, yeah, there's definitely a younger demographic that was marching. And then, Greg, to your point, I have to believe that some of those people that ordered all those books have read them. I mean, I just cannot imagine you go through the effort of getting the list of Black books to read, and then you don't even read one. Like, they have to.
It's performance.
It's for IG. The IG feed needs
put
their
it,
content.
yeah, it's like, it's performance. It's cool. You know what I mean? That's part of it too, I think.
A friend of mine is a bookseller, and he says all of that traffic is gone. that June bump, it's all gone.
The June
all
bump.
Gone.
I think there's one book that's still selling. It's Ibram.
White Fragility. That's the only book that's still selling.
No, and then also Mark from the Beginning. That's still selling too.
Well, you know, racism is rooted in the fact that when I look at you, instead of seeing you, you know how when it says see me, don't see me because look, I look like a white girl and I'm Puerto Rican and I, oh, I gotta change that background, y'all. I'm sorry. That's why I didn't do the video, because that's my work thing. I'm sorry. But see me as an individual, because even when minorities are rich and have money, they're still being stereotyped. They're still being, if somebody doesn't know about you, look what happened to Bill Gates when he got locked out of his house. That's the famous example. Who doesn't know Bill Gates? Not Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
No, you got Skip Gates.
Skip Gates.
The genealogy.
Henry Louis Gates.
Henry Louis Gates.
Henry Louis Gates.
There you go. I'm sorry. Look what happened.
Henry Louis Gates.
Yes. Look what happened to him. He was going into his house. And I mean, who doesn't know who he is? Okay, granted, I just mixed up the names, but I knew his face. I knew who I was talking about. And if I would have seen him, I would have said, hello, Mr. Gates, But instead of taking him at his word that this is his house, he's locked out, he could have very easily brought you some ID if you would have just let him go through the window. They want to, apprehend him. So it doesn't matter if someone's looking at you and judging you on your appearance. If they don't look at you and see you, there's always going to be some kind of judgment, some kind of discrimination. So you can reach high and you can get all up in capitalism and get all that money you want. But somebody's always going to have, and it goes it seems like every ethnic group has their, discriminations that they have to deal with. You got Latinos with, even I still joke around, we know a lot about knives or, things like that, or Italian people, they got to be mafia, or West Indian people, they got to be selling weed. You want weed? Go to, go look for the Jamaican. I mean, come on now. These are stereotypes that get carried on but it's up to you, or it's up to the other person to just see you for who you are. The minute you don't do that, you already given into stereotypes. And that's just that's what I feel Black Lives Matter movement and every movement is about, is see me. I'm a human being and I belong and I matter.
But I think the whole point of her book is that these people aren't doing that work. And it's institutional racism on steroids. And it's been going on for a few hundred years. And I think the underlying question of the book is, how do we break this? How do we break the binds of institutional racism? What can we do intergenerationally so that the next shit that they're going to throw at us, we can undermine it a lot quicker, right? I think that's what comes to my mind when I'm thinking about the text. Is the underlying question is how do we undermine and strengthen ourselves against institutional racism, and particularly the racism that is going on, the power games that are going on in the court system.
Well, I can tell you
because
this,
you gotta talk to power. You have to come to the power table with something.
Yeah, but if we're not up there with them, we can start with where we're at. I mean, like for instance, the way I handle people that I work with the public. I work with people with very sensitive family matters. And the manner in which I approach them and I take my time to explain things. If I see young people on the street that I believe, might be interested in the fact that somebody really cares about them, I might, share some, drop some knowledge on them about a better choice to make instead of maybe smoking weed on the bench and getting busted for something stupid. And then you got to carry that for the rest of your life. And then when you think about what you really want to do, you're like, God, is it really worth it? And I just talk to them like that. I'm gonna say, do what you want to do, but I'm telling you like that, if we could just contribute the way we can, what is within our means to contribute, that is the start. Because I don't need to sit at the table, with, let's say, I even if I sat there, Jay-Z came from Brooklyn, I'm from the Bronx. And even though there's certain things I probably can relate to with him, I can never relate to what he went through to get to where he's at. So, you know, I'm going to talk to people at my level, and then I'm going to rely on the representatives of the next level, and so on and so forth. And we just got to be a strong chain. None of us, we all need to be, what do they say, strong links. But we can do it from where we stand. We don't have to go climbing.
You certainly have individual power. I'm just thinking about, how do we collectively do this work? How do we put pressure on those who are our upper representatives to do the work? You
Voting
know,
power. Paying attention to who we putting in locally, you know, like
I mean, for example, somebody like Cory Booker, who was in Newark. One of the things he did in his tenure as a Black representative was Newark owned its own water. Cory goes and sells the water rights to Newark. So then people have to buy water or pay for water like they would electricity when it was free. That's your Black representative, right? And I'm just saying, how do we collectively come to bear pressure on someone like that? You don't have to answer that. It's just a rhetorical question. You know, how do we leverage some level of upper echelon power in this culture? And yes, it certainly can come from the people. We could all refuse to shop that. We could hold our money for 90 days, right? We could hold our money for 2 weeks in this culture and bear some pressure.
Right.
But we can't get ourselves to agree to do that.
Look at the bus boycotts in the South, how that turned that around. So I mean, that's just there are a lot of different things we could do, from small to large, depending on how much power we have or who we are or whatever. But we can we can boycott. I mean, nothing wrong with that. In the South, they stopped that because our people had to go to the back of the bus. They stopped taking the bus and they got the cars and they lined up because people had to go to work. They took people to work that day. So, I mean, that's power,
And I'm only saying that to say that we do have power. I mean, the dominant narrative that's going on right now is blank blank has gotten in the Supreme Court and we're powerless. Are we?
Can we vote ourselves out of this situation?
Huh?
Can we vote ourselves out of this situation?
No.
In the sense, like,
no.
If there's 80, 90% voting, is that possible?
I think it'll help. Like when we got our AG in, the New York AG is a Black woman who's trying to combat the monumental task. So I think that there is definitely strength in voting.
I think it gives more legitimacy.
It has to be Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just think that voting just gives more legitimacy to these systems that are already corrupt, right? We keep trying to work within the system that is abusing us and requesting from the system that is abusing us, and it's not working. I think voting is an important tool, but I don't think it's the only tool that we should be utilizing. And I think in a lot of ways, it's like Audre Lorde. I keep coming back to Audre Lorde when any kind of voting campaign or promotion happens. It's like you can't dismantle. It's like something.
The master's house using his own tools.
Right. Exactly. It's like we keep trying to use the system that is corrupt and always corrupt to get what we want. And these systems were not built to have us gain what we want, right? To humanize us. They weren't built that way. So why do we keep adding more legitimacy with our votes, with our petitions to these systems that are now have never been built to work for us, right? So this is what I keep coming back to. It's just frustrating. It's like Black and Indigenous and Latinx folks are hitting ourselves. It's like doing what is that that saying about insanity is like you keep doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for different results. That's what we're doing. That is what we're doing. So yeah, I don't think that we can vote ourselves out of this by any means.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you. But I don't know if we're ready for a separate a separate state. I mean, like that's what I would like, to be separated from all of this, and to, build up a non-corrupt place where we could all participate and give to, but that doesn't exist. That's my fantasy. But I think voting, but I think it has to be from local all the way up. And we have to know who we're voting for. I mean, you have a local congressperson or assembly person. Who is this person? So we have to know who this person is and what they're, what they've done in the past. If they're, if they got voted in 4 years ago, we have to know what they did for us, but that's just one thing. There's so many other different things that we need to do simultaneously, voting, and we need to go into the, well, I don't know, can't go into the schools now, but somehow improve our schools, we need to support, people in different positions who are trying to, in corporate positions who are trying to rise up, and who are not stopped by the glass ceiling. There are just, there's so many things that we need to do. And I guess everybody, and also give money to those groups that are fighting for our rights. So I think each one of us has to pick what we can do and try to do it and encourage other people, because I don't know any other, I don't know any other way. Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be a revolution. And what if there's a revolution? They all kill us. I mean, they kill us all, they have the guns, I wish there was a revolution, but
the revolution ain't coming from the top.
At all.
They already have the power. They already have the power. The revolution is going to come from the bottom or the middle.
Right. But I don't know. I'm saying, I'm talking about us, ordinary people.
Yes.
I don't know if
the revolution is ordinary people.
But it starts with ordinary people, though. It starts with
ordinary people.
Know, but I don't know if that's going to be successful. Really, I don't know, because we don't have tanks. We don't have guns. I mean, well, some of us do have guns, but
does it have to be a violent
revolution?
It doesn't. I mean, the truth of the matter is, I mean, there's so many different ways to put pressure on the system. So after you vote, what if you're like in your congressman's face every week? What if you get What if you get your whole, all the people that live in the NYCHA houses with you, all of y'all get on your local congressman, right? Or your local senator.
We already saw.
It's about pressure and strategic pressure, right?
Right. But, no, that's
I mean,
true.
I think the narrative that keeps getting, that people keep getting, is the one: we're on the bottom, we don't have guns, we don't have that, we're powerless. That's not true.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't say we're powerless. I'm just saying revolution really means revolution is a big effort. I'm not saying we can't change things and we shouldn't change things. We should, but revolution is huge.
Yeah, and you know what? And the people make it happen. The people make it happen. We just
Well, I
saw a glimpse of that, just a glimpse in the protests around George Floyd. That was a glimpse.
And I think,
And when people hit the streets, they're at the wall. People are gonna go to the wall. It doesn't, revolution happens. It just happens. It it ain't going to be televised. It might be on Twitter. I doubt it. I'm being bad.
And I think anytime you go up against, or you attempt to speak out against the status quo, if you attempt to go against the status quo, and the status quo is racist capitalism, that's what it is. There will always be violence. I was a part of the George Floyd protest earlier on, like May, June. I was arrested. I was put in a cage. I was put in jail. I got markings from, being arrested by 2 police officers. I saw people get baton whipped, pushed to the ground, kicked in the face by, several officers. So no matter what we do, if we are serious about change, we are going to be met with violence, point blank, period. We could be walking down the streets, marching from 125th Street to 5th Avenue, which was the case for me. We are going to be met by violence because very much law enforcement, the people that law enforcement reports to and on and so forth, they want to keep the status quo because, as Gregory said, it works for them. There's lots of profit being made. There's lots of, economic interests, political interests that are, being maintained by keeping the way things are. But I feel like if we go in being fearful of that, we won't get anywhere. Martin Luther King, I think about Martin Luther King, he was jailed 29 times and assassinated. Fannie Lou Hamer, brutalized by police officers, several times. All of our civil rights leaders, when you think about what they've gone through in order to have like the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act passed, right? They knew, what they were up against, and they still did it because that's ultimately, the change is worth it, right? Even if we don't see it in our lifetime, it's worth it. And you just can't be fearful. You can't be afraid.
Well, the thing about one of the gifts from the civil rights movement is that those people prepared. They practiced. They rehearsed getting shit thrown on them. They had a strategy about what to do when you get arrested. People knew what the next steps were. They didn't go in ignorant or blind. And everywhere they went, they organized. So that marching down the street wasn't just a march down the street. The women were in the inside. They weren't on the outside where the police could hit them. They had a strategy. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't pure. But I think one of the gifts from the movement to now is that they had a plan. They knew they were going to get hit. They knew they were going to get pistol whooped or beat up with batons or arrested. That's why they sent the youth out. They sent the youth to, the parents had to work. The youth could come out of school and go to jail. That was a strategy. So that's what I think your point is really well made. And people have to figure out what the price is and what the line is that they individually and collectively want to go. Some people may not want to get arrested. Some people will be like, hey, take me. You have to figure out what that is for you individually, and then who do you connect to collectively? So that there's 3,000 of y'all coming, not 1 or 5. just questions, not an indictment. I'm not in that group that can go to jail. I ain't going to jail. You know, but there are people who can do that. You know.
Yeah. I think some of the groups that organize now were that strategic. There was a piece in the Times of a gentleman that the police was trying to lure him out of his home, and he had a lawyer on standby. He had his organization or his group of protesters come to his location to make sure that he wasn't arrested. And there was like a standoff between him and the police officers because they were trying to lure him out of the house to arrest him for something that they believed he did. He eventually ended up turning himself in, but under his own terms and with
I remember that. Yeah.
Right? So I think that even the movement that is happening now, there are some organizations that are absolutely planning, just like you said, they planned back in the 60s and in the 50s, you know? It's just a matter of which ones and like how far are you willing to go? Yeah.
I mean, it is still organized today because I would be remiss not to mention, I know we're running out of time here, but out of all the protests in New York City, at least this spring and summer, the most brutally repressed and beaten down one was the one in the Bronx, where it was over 300 people that were arrested. And they had National Lawyers Guild on hand. They didn't care. The cops arrested the lawyers. Medics, they didn't care. They arrested the medics. So it didn't matter how much you prepared. These people aren't just going angrily into the streets. I'm sure some people were, but there were organizations behind it, planning it, being strategic. It doesn't matter how strategic. When you have the law enforcement apparatus ready to crack down on you, they're going to crack skulls regardless. And that's how you get 300 plus arrested and all that other mess that happened. Which isn't to say that we don't keep fighting. You still keep fighting anyway. But actions like that are meant to dissuade people who might be watching that and saying, oh, I was going to go to a future protest, but now if that's what it's going to be like, I'm going to avoid it. And that's what we have to keep fighting back.
Yeah, because I think in some cases they suspended habeas corpus, so people didn't get out in the 24 hours.
Yeah, there was no habeas.
Yeah, no,
Oh, but I was going to say, Greg, to your point, actually, I just forgot exactly what you said, but it made me think of this. There are these little pockets of resistance. Like a lot of the cops used technology to identify people and then bring cases against them. But then the cops themselves had their faces covered, so they were unidentifiable. So sometimes when these cases are brought forth, they're unable to specifically identify the cops that were involved in the beatings or whatever. Yeah, and their badge numbers were covered. So some tech person is trying to, he has figured out a way to uncover cops' identities, and he's like piecing together eyeballs and something he's doing, and he's uncovering a lot of the cops that were involved in the protests. And so, oh, what?
No, I was just gonna say they don't have to do all that. They know who was assigned to the protests.
Well, but just like is mentioned in the book, they don't want to put forth that information because then when it goes to trial, they can't, they don't want to be held accountable.
Right, but they shouldn't even have the right to withhold that information because they work for us.
But they do. That's part of the problem.
I know they
discovery.
do, but that's part of the issue that I know we passed 8:30, and I shouldn't be the one making us go further, but that's part of the issue, that they do ignore the law, that the police or corrections, or like I heard a report that today, like assaults in prisons are way up from correction officers, even though the population is dramatically smaller. Like how could that be? And how nobody, what's their names? What these police officers' names? Why can they keep this information hidden from us if we pay their salary? I don't get it. I'm sorry, Stephanie. I broke my own rule.
No, it's okay.
What about that
So
new rule where they have to check to the officer's background to make sure that they were not involved in any disciplinary actions that were involving, you know, crimes against the people that they were supposed to be serving.
I thought that was a proposal. I didn't know if it would had actually been passed as like
no.
law.
It's in effect because we were actually in a training today. They give trainings every week, and one of the cases they were discussing, now it's part of the checklist. Was that done? Was that checked off to make sure that that was asked or researched with regard to the officers testifying in any juvie case?
Okay. 8:34. And I just want to mention the chat. Sarata Justice Committee is a grassroots org dedicated to building a movement against police violence and systemic racism in New York City. They also conduct cop watch training. Yes. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. There's a link for y'all to check out. Thank you so much, everybody, for this energy. I agree with Marta. I love this energy. Like, Sarata, thank you, for really saying what it is and providing that energy. And thank you everybody for showing up. And, I think the point is like what Cleaver quoted, scrolling up, it's just perfect. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward anyway. And I think that's the energy that we need to be on, like, at this point, you know what I mean? And yeah, we can think about the individuals, and I know this person, or maybe if we do this on an individual level, but this is grander, we need to think about as a collective. And I agree. Like, thank you.